Are those uni curtains?
Right there.
Those. I need something that blocks like that amount of light.
Yeah, definitely figuring out the lighting situation in here. This is my temporary office while the shed office is being created. It's right there. There's no windows in there, so that's better.
I feel like there always has to be somebody working here who's getting a shed office.
Absolutely. Just continuing to carry the torch for Faith.
I'm sure she appreciates it. How's the rest of the house going?
It's good. Moving is always a disaster in some capacity, so that was accurate this weekend.
Yep.
But we are here, so
nice.
And I found my charger.
Good.
Yeah. I made it through Monday on one laptop charge, and then I went, oh shit, I don't know where my office box is. So
I was lucky that both of my my work laptop and my personal laptop are the exact same computer, like down to the color.
Yeah.
So
I mean, diving into Apple compatibility issues, why do all of their laptops not have the same charger? It's frustrating.
Don't know. That's probably, I'm wondering if that's how they designed it from the get-go. I'm excited to have you on today because you're our resident product guru. And today we are talking, to that point, about the first iPhone that ever went on sale.
Very exciting.
I'm trying different spots in my office to see what works best for recording. There's a lot of noise bouncing out of my little closet office back there, so now I'm facing the window and I feel like all the light's hitting my glasses.
Every once in a while, a revolutionary product comes along that changes everything.
On June 29th, 2007, 6 months after the iPhone was introduced to the world, it finally went on sale.
Rich DeMuro with CNET TV in New York City at the Apple Store, where the iPhone is set to launch later today at 6 o'clock. Right now, it's about 4:50 in the afternoon. Yesterday, when we were here, there were about 19 people waiting in line for this phone. Today, as you can see, hundreds more, all waiting for this brand new device.
They sold 1 million phones in the first 74 days, which is insane to me. Since those early days, the ensuing iPhone models have continued to set sales records and have completely changed not only the smartphone and technology industries, but the world as well. Development of the iPhone began in earnest in 2004, when Apple had a team of 1,000 employees that they had hired for the highly confidential project. It was led by hardware engineer Tony Fadell, software engineer Scott Forstall, and design officer Johnny Ive. Then CEO Steve Jobs steered the team away from the tablet they were initially working on to build the phone, which was done in conjunction with Singular Wireless, which would later become AT&T. It cost about $150 million to produce, which is about $220 million in today's money, and took about 30 months to do. Steve Jobs unveiled the first generation iPhone to the public on January 9th, 2007 at the Macworld 2007 convention, which I'm sure was the most exciting of the Mac conventions to ever happen, considering this phone came out. It incorporated a 3.5-inch multi-touch display with very few hardware buttons and ran the iPhone operating system with a touch-friendly interface. At that point, it was marketed as Mac OS X. It launched on June 29th, 2007 at a starting price of $499, which is $730 today, and still seems cheap considering how much we spend on phones. It required a 2-year contract with AT&T, which I remember being really bummed about. I think everybody was. I want the iPhone and I don't have AT&T.
I was one of the lucky few who already had AT&T, so...
Oh, nice. I've been on Verizon for an absurd amount of time, 20 years or something. They released to other providers in 2011. As of November 1st, 2018, more than 2.2 billion iPhones have been sold. And right now they account for about 15.6% of the global smartphone usage.
15%? That number is astonishing to me. I would have thought it was at least 50.
For the number of things that exclusively exist for the iPhone, I agree with you.
I mean, just this morning, I had a conversation with a Gun.io client who is building an iOS app. And I had the question, do you also plan to release this on the Android store? I don't even know if that's what it's called. And they said, no, we're just, we're exclusively building it for the iPhone App Store. And now just to know that that's, 15% of global users, that's a really interesting choice to make.
But I feel like a lot of times, I mean, I think I looked up something that the amount of apps there are for the iPhone versus Android is significantly larger for Android. But any product I've ever worked on, iPhone was the first thing they wanted an app for.
Super interesting.
From a product standpoint, that doesn't make sense. You would think you want to market to the most amount of people, but maybe not.
And something that the 15% doesn't tell us right off the bat is what cohort of the global population does that 15% make up. If it's 90% of your target users, then it makes sense to build exclusively, or at least first, for iPhone users.
Oh, that is a really good point though. If you're developing, like what is the breakdown of that 15% in like the biggest technological markets? Maybe half of the people who live in the Bay Area have iPhones. Half of them have Androids. So in that case, it's like it makes sense to go about it that way, I guess. Yeah, I don't know. I've had a couple iPhones. I think that on the whole, I love my Android phones.
Oh, I don't know if I've met someone who's had both.
Yeah, I've gone back and forth.
What has been your experience? Yeah, switching back and forth.
I prefer like the what is the word? Customizability of the Android interface. I do acknowledge that it is harder to get used to and it is harder to master. I feel like iPhone was designed right off the bat to appeal to the largest number of people, to make it the easiest as possible to use. I conned my husband into getting a Google phone at one point, and it turned out to be like the worst Google phone I had ever had. It was the only one, the only Android powered phone he ever had. He'll never let me live it down, and he'll never get another Android. Yeah. His user experience wasn't great.
Yeah, I mean, so in 2007, June of 2007, I was about to go into high school, and I think I was rocking a pink Motorola Razr at the time.
Oh, yes. Yes.
Which now they've brought the Razr back, which I'm very tempted to get one. And I think I didn't get my first iPhone until maybe a couple years later. Still very early user, relatively, now that I'm looking at the numbers. But I've had an iPhone ever since then, probably since 2010.
I mean, I probably have gone back and forth. I'm sure I started on Android because I had a smartphone since I can remember. But obviously, having Verizon, I couldn't get an iPhone until at least 2011.
Right.
Which seems like so long ago and really isn't.
Yeah, not in the long arch of technology history, but it was super interesting. Right. I had no idea that the initial project that the 1,000 engineers were working on was a tablet and then converted to a phone project, which, really kind of makes sense with the functionality that the iPhone has today. Maybe not initially when it was released, but our iPhones and our smartphones can do pretty much everything that a tablet can do, just on a smaller screen. And I think that's the expectation that most people have today of that. But it's funny that we still call it a phone, because I probably use the phone functionality on my iPhone like 2% of the time.
Yeah. Yep. I rarely use the phone. I remember when you had minutes when unlimited
Yes.
calling wasn't a thing. I don't know how I would ever reach minutes at this point. You can communicate solely through text, email. That's fine.
I'm sure that that's a metric that is in settings, how many minutes I have used this month.
I do think it's interesting that they still kept with the tablet idea in building out iPads. Did you find it? How many minutes?
No. I couldn't.
It'll be I'll find it and message you later.
I mean, it used to be very prominent, but now the key metric that they show you in cellular settings is how much data you've used.
Yep. Yeah. Which mine is usually high. I use it also for like if I want to work somewhere that's not home. I have my phone, and then I have a separate hotspot depending on where I am. Service in Asheville is atrocious. So you have to have options. You'd think being in the middle of the city, you'd have great service, and you just can't do anything.
I mean, frankly, in Austin as well, there are the neighborhood that I just moved into. I'm on Verizon now, but I've got like one bar of service in my house. And if I go 2 streets over, it's perfect. So it's unpredictable.
Never can tell. I think it's crazy that I think that this is a theme that's kind of been coming up a lot this season in the history episodes, is like how long it took to do an initial idea, and then how relatively short all of the innovation was after that.
The iterations.
So if you think like 1,000 people working for 3 years is a lot of manpower, brain power, figuring out technological capacities. And now you look at like, every year there's a new phone. Every year there's a new iPhone.
I think that, I mean, at least to some degree, that's explainable by it's far easier to iterate than it is to create from scratch. And, there was, I think, like one prototype of a smartphone before the iPhone was released, but really not comparable at all to the functionality that the first iPhone released with. So I can imagine that, probably half or more of the complexity was just deciding what to release with, like what was enough or what was too much. And
that's a really interesting concept.
Yeah. And how do you that was probably one of the first personal computers of that size. And how do you get that much functionality into that small of a space?
It's already going to blow people's minds. Right. No matter what you do, if you give somebody a tiny computer with a touch screen, and it's the first one anybody has really interacted with, it's going to be amazing no matter how far you got in the project. Do you think there were things that they tucked back in the corner? They were like, we'll save this for a future release.
I don't know. I mean, I didn't pull up what were the standard apps that came with the first iPhone. I did find that the App Store was part of the initial release, and there were 500 apps that were there initially. So even before they launched the phone, they had to have been in contact with other independent developers who wanted to put apps on the App Store. So, I mean, developing the iPhone was a feat in and of itself. Can you imagine trying to be an outside development team trying to create an app for a new operating system that doesn't exist yet? That sounds impossible.
And even, I'm sure that they were given beta versions of whatever the iPhone was to test the app, but how stable were those? I think that was the time where it was the big thing about the App Store was there's an app for that.
Yes.
The madness around the apps.
Overnight, there was an app for everything and too many things.
Yeah. That didn't need an app. It still doesn't. Right. I'm sure I have multiple apps in here. I mean, I get now mine does the thing where it's hey, you haven't used this app in forever. We're removing it from your phone. And then you need it at a time when it's very inconvenient to try and get the app back on the phone.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I wonder what it was like to kind of be a part of the team that competed with that.
Like against the iPhone?
Yeah. I feel like one of the things that I've always liked about Android as well is that a lot of times features or like I can't think of another way to say it. Things that happen on iPhone that my husband gets like real excited about. And like that, I had that on my Android 2 years ago.
Oh, really?
But I wonder where and when that shift took place, because obviously these phones, I'm sure somebody else would have come along with a smartphone, but I feel like the majority of what we have now is based on the model that iPhone started out with. So at what point did that kind of shift to where, you know, like when the first iPhones came out, iPhone had to have 100% of the market share of smartphones because they were it.
Right. They were the only ones. Their iterations after that came with, you know, these annual product releases and so much fanfare and excitement around this new feature. Like, even if it was inconsequential, it kind of makes you feel like, wow, this is the coolest thing ever.
Yeah. It's almost
and
consequential
since then,
because it exists for the first time.
right. But even to your point, if it doesn't exist for the first time, I bet you that Apple's marketing team finds a way each time that there's a new iPhone release to make it feel like it's the first time, or that they've put a spin on it, which is just great product marketing on their part.
It is. Like, Apple's marketing, bar none, some of the best technological marketing that's ever existed.
Mm-hmm.
You really buy into like the feeling that they want you to have. And you know, I do use an Android phone. Everything else is Apple. Like, I only own MacBooks, iPads. You know, I've never delved into what those other companies offer for those. And I think it's because
Right.
I'm still so tied to like Apple's marketing. Apple's product marketing is amazing. I wonder how much of that innovation that they've had to have or had to kind of explore is because they have, like, if that is kind of like a catch-22. Like, we have this great marketing, so we need something great to market.
It would be fascinating to know who holds the influence in Apple's product development team.
I mean, my gut says product. Everything's product driven in the end.
Yeah.
But if you don't have a great product to market, your job is so much harder. And I feel like Apple's always made it easy. Like the iPhone, even the very first one, you can't, there is nothing you could do. There are no metrics you could produce that would be better than we sold 1 million of these in 74 days.
And I know that, you know, their contract with AT&T and that exclusivity, you know, you mentioned that it kind of limited the user base for the first 4 years. Super interesting move. And I'm sure that if we were back in those meetings discussing the pros and cons of that, there probably were some very different, strong opinions. But I can imagine, after having spent 3 years and hundreds of $millions of investment, partnering with a company like AT&T to probably subsidize the manufacturing and distribution of the phones was the way to make it happen. And so it was probably a trade-off decision, but one that obviously paid off for them.
Yeah, hugely.
Mm-hmm.
I couldn't get it. I wanted one. 2011 rolls around and it's finally like, I'm sure that if we looked at the numbers, there would have been like a huge explosion in purchases of iPhones in 2011 because everybody could finally get them on the provider they'd been working with or running with for however long they had.
And then jailbreaking became a thing.
God, I forgot about jailbreaking.
Right?
I think I have a friend who still does that because he buys like weird phones from China. I'm not sure why. Maybe he enjoys the challenge of it.
And just like slightly incorrect grammatical everything.
Yes. Like, what did you load this with? It's like British slang. Where do you think the next iteration of this could go?
Looking back at all of the different iPhone models that I've had, it feels like from a hardware perspective, there have been a couple of big changes that they've made and lots of mixed feedback about, when they took the button away, like, oh, that was a huge deal. And then when the charging port changed and when the headphone jack disappeared, it feels like every time that they do something big like that to the hardware, people are pretty frustrated, but then almost overnight, it's just like, oh, this is the new way. And on the operating system, it feels like it's hard to say this because it was so revolutionary not so long ago, but really what more could they do other than incremental improvements?
It almost feels like we're at like a bit of a plateau with new hardware. Aside from, I think,
like there's not nothing that can be done. I think it was within the past week that they made an announcement of new iOS updates and the feature to like very targeted Gen X millennial feature of get the transcription back of the person leaving you a voicemail while it's happening so that you can decide if you want to pick it up. Like, spot on. Good feedback there.
Love that. I would love
that. So like, yeah, there's still ways that it's evident that they're taking user feedback and understanding ways to be, I mean, that's not even revolutionary. That's going back to when we used to have house phones and voicemail recorders that would play things out loud. But, just like continuing to improve.
It's crazy how like it kind of changed the whole, I feel like smartphones coming about changed the way that we feel like we have to be available. Like when you have everything at your fingertips,
100%.
you have a phone, you have your email, you have your messaging system for work, you have a phone, you have the internet. It's almost like all of that just means that like everything can happen immediately. You're always available, you're always on. I would be interested to find like, some sort of feature that lets you not always be on, aside from those like the no phones.
Yeah,
I don't know. I can't remember if that's what they're called.
I've been tempted so many times to go to those.
Oh yeah,
but I can't navigate without Google Maps now. So,
yep.
What would I do?
I think I was talking to Regis about this maybe. About like I've lived here a year now and I still can't get anywhere without Google Maps. How long will it take me to learn? I have no idea. Some days you're like, do I have time to get lost?
Yes. See, that's my thing. I am totally fine with getting lost at times. My partner, on the other hand, if I drive without directions, it's like, where are you going? Why are you taking this route? So we just live by Google Maps now.
That seems because I work from home. My husband he's been out, like he goes to work 3 days a week. He drives all over the city. His job is on like basically the complete opposite side of the city from where we are. And he drives a different route every time to get himself familiar with the city.
Oh, interesting.
Which I thought was really smart. I'm not going to do that. I'm going to rely on my smartphone.
Like the predictability. Yeah.
Yeah. As with all technology, there's good and bad that's come from it. The first iPhone really enabled the portability of people's lives.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I mean, there are many aspects of my job that I can do from a phone. Not that it's convenient or easy, but it's kind of like if you need to leave the house and you need to stay connected because you need to go pick up your kid from school, it's just as easy to carry your phone with you as it is a computer.
I've tried walking around mobile with my computer before. It's not very convenient. So
My boot camp, I went to school with a kid who was like super excited about everything. He was always working. So even walking to the train from class, he'd have it. He was like hold his computer.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. It's not a choice I would have made in downtown Chicago, but he never, never dropped it, never got stolen. So that's not the kind of portability I'm here for.
No, I am here for it fits in my pocket.
Yes. Yeah. Which it does. I say cheers to iPhone.
Cheers.
Cheers my seltzer water, my soda water, and Dr. Dre.
Thanks for listening to the Frontier Podcast powered by Gun.io. We drop 2 episodes per week, so if you like this episode, be sure to subscribe on your platform of choice and come hang out with us again next week and bring all your internet friends. If you have questions or recommendations, just shoot us a Twitter DM at The Frontier Pod, and we'll see you next week.